All right, we'll call this meeting of the Board of Trustees for October 13th to order, please, with a roll call.
Veronica Frankel. Present. Howard Rosenberg.
Here.
Lisa Ruggiero.
Present, thank you.
Nick Smith.
He'll be late.
Angela Taylor.
I'm here.
John Mayer.
Here.
Kyle Hood.
Present.
And Barbara McClory. Present. We have a quorum.
All right. If we could stand for the pledge, please. We have another person that lost the interim in front of their name.
All right.
He is the permanent chief of police for Washoe County School District. No longer interim. So would you lead us in the pledge as one of your official duties?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And congratulations on your appointment. Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. Let the record show unanimous. Okay, public comment. I have one, but he wants to speak at 5:01. Is that correct, Mr. Daly?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, and I have one that didn't put down the agenda item. Elsa Diaz. Do you want to speak now or wait for an item or? Okay.
Hello.
Oh, turn your mic on.
Hello, my name is Alvara Diaz, and usually I come to speak to complain, but today I'm going to speak to congratulate the school district of Washoe, because the school district of Washoe is an example to support kids. Thank you for the policy of supporting transgender students. When the Pope came to the United States, I joined a group of 100 women. We walked 100 miles for 100 reasons. I walked for 8 days, and my goal was to reach out to the Pope so the Pope understands transgender people. I was able to see the Pope, but I was not able to talk to the Pope. When I came home, I was very tired. I didn't bring my kid with me. He was with Daddy, so he hugged me. And Monday in the morning, in the Facebook, the journalist of Univision of Nevada, she won the miniseries that we cover about transgender kids in Nevada, which I was there, my son was there, and 2 other kids from Vegas. I was proud to say that my kid in Washoe Country is very accepted in school. He's very happy. Was too bad was not the same for kids in Las Vegas. So this journalist won the award for Intravision for the best miniseries. And she said that this award is for me and for the other mother in Vegas. So for me, I want to tell you thank you for the support. Another thing too, Tracy Davis, I think you are awesome. You've been spending time also to go to Elko. There's a kid in Elko who has not the same luck that I have. And this family is isolated. That school needs to do something about. And my own superintendent, Tracy Davis, is taking the time to go there and help them. So Washoe School District is making a local and national precedent, supporting human beings being happy. And also on Thursday, in the Spire High School, a counselor called me so I can translate so one kid can come out to the mom to be transgender. So by doing all these things, the counselor did really a great job, and we're saving lives, we're making kids happy, and then the kids are going to be educated better, and we're setting a good standard. Maybe we're not the best in education, but we're doing better, and you guys doing an awesome job. Thank you for the top of my heart. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. We sure appreciate them. Thank you. And I don't have any other cards, only one on 501. Is there anyone that would like to speak and fill out a card later? Seeing none, we'll move on to board reports. And we'll start with Veronica Frankel.
Thank you, President Mayor. Let's see, in the last couple of weeks, Vice President Taylor and I had the wonderful opportunity to travel to Phoenix to attend the Council of Urban Boards of Education Conference, which is extremely valuable, motivational, inspiring, a lot of great information. And what I'll also say, it was that it was very validating about many of the projects and the work that we're doing and the success we're having, because we heard a lot of really interesting programs, but I also realized that many of those interesting programs and those successful programs we've got underway here. So I was really proud to be a part of that conversation and enjoyed sharing that opportunity with Vice President Taylor. Last week, we also, many of us were at the Spotlight on Success at Sparks High School, and I really enjoyed that opportunity to recognize a number of students, staff, community members. I just love that program, so I always want to say when we have it, that it's such a valuable way for us to reinforce the message that it takes the business community, the parents, and good teachers and great teachers and good schools to achieve educational success. And then last week, I also participated and really enjoyed spending time with a lot of children at Libby Booth for International Walk to School Day, and I was there with Chief Trevino and Superintendent Davis, and we had the opportunity to walk with close to 100 kids. It was a great group, and learn about safety and looking first before stepping off the curb, and bright at night, and all those great messages. So I really enjoyed that, and appreciate the work of our school police and the Safe Walk to School program, which is really, really important, Safe Routes to School program. So that's it for me.
Mr. Rosenberg.
Went to Jesse Beck's to judge their scarecrow contest. Too many of them looked like me. But other than that, very successful. They had over 100 pumpkins. And instead of carving them, which always gives everybody, especially at the younger grades, a little bit of the fantas for fear that they might hurt themselves, they painted them. You have not lived until you've seen a green pumpkin with glitter all over it. It was wonderful, absolutely fantastic. And the scarecrows were damn good, damn good. And they involve families with it as well. And it's become a tradition for some, and for others it was the first time, but they had an awfully good time. I have 7 students presently in our public schools. Most of them are at the middle school level. And they are with their teachers for one full day, from 7 in the morning till 3 o'clock at night. And the teachers and the principals in these schools have been absolutely marvelous. It's one of the best programs I think I've been able to become attached to in a long, long time. And I've been out visiting. And it isn't Trustee Rosenberg, I hope. It's that pain in the you-know-where Rosenberg from the university. Great fun.
Dr. McCleary.
Yes, with great thanks to Angie Taylor and Veronica Frankel. We had a wonderful conference on board governance this past Friday, which lasted the whole day. And I think that we've come to a pretty great understanding of the common ground that we're going to try and move forward together. And there's many, many activities, I think, that are going to grow out of that work that we did. And I felt very grateful that he had come and that he had been there, and we got everything pretty much out on the table. So I think we're off to a roaring good start. Thanks.
Mr. Kyle.
We have our second meeting for the Student Advisory Board next week, and we're just going to decide what we want to do all year. I think that's it.
Well, that's a
Trustee Ruggiero.
that's a tough act to follow. Well, it's been a busy couple of weeks. I serve as the vice president for the NIAA, which is the statewide association that oversees student athletics and activities. Honored to represent the school board doing that. And we had some good news for our school district at the meeting. One was we currently went through a realignment, and it put Worcester in the 4A category. And that's a little difficult for Worcester with football because they're used to being in the 3A category. So they did petition the board between myself and my fellow board member, our student activities director, Brian Roth. We were able to convince our fellow board members from across the state to allow Worcester to come down to the 3A level in football only. And Worcester was very happy. Leah Kuchar, our Worcester principal, came and gave a very passionate, almost too passionate of his presentation, but it was very compelling, and they obliged that request. So very grateful to our fellow board members across the state. So if you see those trustees, please give them a big thank you. And then we also adopted a new model for soccer. We've adopted the European model. That'll allow some of our teams to play each other. So for example, Incline does very well in soccer, and so we're going to bump them up. They'll be allowed to play 4A schools, so that's kind of exciting for our soccer program. And I'm looking at Dan. Did I miss anything?
Sparks is the same way. Sparks is 3.
Yes, yeah. So it'll be very beneficial for us, for the school district. So that's what's happening at the NIAA. And then we also had our Safe and Healthy Schools Commission meeting. So grateful to all the individuals from the community who sit on that board. We had some exciting news that we talked about. We're actually looking at the qualifications for the RFP that we'll be putting out to conduct our safety audits in the schools, which is part of our strategic plan. Andrea has been so helpful in that process because I just say, well, we need this, this, and that, and then she writes it in this beautiful format, so that's been very helpful. So thank you to that. We also had 2 of our commission members sit through the interview process for chief of police, and although I haven't spoke with them, I'm sure they enjoyed the process thoroughly, and I thought that was very nice for the superintendent and chief of staff. Well, deputy superintendent now, to invite 2 of the members to participate. So thank you for that. And we also received a letter of intent for a very large donation to the school district, which we'll be announcing down the road. We'll be coming in front of the school board, the commission will be, to give that news. Also, Irene did a beautiful job presenting a format for our safety forums, and we'll be coming back to hopefully at the next board meeting with kind of a I'm looking. I don't know who to look at.
The Wonder
in the
Twins.
future, we have a lot of business that the Safety Commission has conducted, and now it's time to report back to the board and get your input and support on some of these big upcoming projects. So I think that's about it so far. And I truly enjoyed the work session on Friday. I thought it was very informative and good for the trustees and our superintendent. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
I think between Lisa and Veronica, they summed it all up for me, but I did want to say thank you to Veronica and Angie for putting together that work session on Friday. That was really good. And I always have a great time when I get to go to the Spotlights on Success and recognize our staff and students in the district who do so well. I mean, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good things, not just the people who get the awards at those things. So thank you to all those guys. That's my entire report. I'm done.
I can pretty much say ditto. Everything I was involved in, from Q to the Spotlight, which I think a highlight of the Spotlight were those teachers from the international, from the other countries.
Yeah.
And how they came in, and there were a couple dozen of them almost. I mean, they were very excited, and they came in and they really learning from their experience with our teachers. So I'm really excited, really proud of our district for being a part of that partnership with the university. Door to door was one of the things that's happened. I always enjoyed door to door, going and talking to kids, and I just remember being so excited when I got up that morning, like, let's just go get some kids. I mean, give kids another opportunity to get this thing done. So kudos to all the staff members that do a great job with that. And I just wanted to really thank my colleagues, all 7 of you, including our superintendent, for really being fully engaged and being all in for that retreat that we had on Friday. It was a great session for us, but it can only be a great session if everybody really buys in and really
opens and brings their best and have some really great conversations so we can be a great board. So I was really, really proud of the work that was done, that all of us did together, and I look forward to those next steps. So thank you all for coming and being a part of it.
Thank you.
Okay. My report, I want to thank the staff that filled up the void when Terry's absent, because she used to do all that spotlight sparks, and I had all the awards done and everything, and you guys filled up, didn't miss a step, and it was truly great. And I think that having talked with some of those teachers from the foreign countries, that we should continue to do that. I know there's a lot of paperwork and red tape that goes through to get it, but I think it's well worth having them and everything. And then I met with several business people that I didn't know why I was going there, but I was. And they are really proud of what we've been doing this year in all of our efforts, and really the graduation rates and everything. And they wanted to mainly say that they realize that you can't compare ACT scores from this year from before, when only those that wanted to go on to college wholeheartedly and needed that test to get into colleges of their choice were taking the test, and now everyone. And they said that the public appreciates it, although they don't have a bandwagon to sound it about the appreciation, but they think it's unfair to compare the scores from the present way that it's done to past. So I was really surprised when I got there, and that was what they wanted. And I want to thank Lisa for the wonderful job she's doing on the safe and healthy schools, although I was called out early, and I'm sorry about that. And then door to door, I just have to say I went to 3 with Dan and BP over at Sparks and everything. And I've ran into 2 of the kids that we went and visited, and they say, and they were not there. We talked to their mother and father and not them. And I don't know how they knew me, but they came up and says, "Oh, Mr. Mayor," at different times, "we really appreciate it, and we're going to make you proud. We're going to put our nose to the grindstone, so to speak, and improve our pathway to success." And I thought that was a great thing for the whole school district. We can multiply that by, how many do we have? 400 people out on door to door. Multiply it by that, and that's a lot of kids. That's a lot of kids. So, and I know that takes a lot of work on Eric Byer, and the whole school district putting it together, because you just go there and they have it all mapped out for you, and they have a GPS or whatever that's called, so you can find where you're going. So it's great. And the superintendent's report.
So as JJ pulled up this video, I'm going to say ditto to everything that we've done in the last 2 weeks, and we could be here like forever if I was giving a true report. So I kind of wanted to isolate this down. I want to thank Elvira Diaz, who gave the public comment today about the work that the district has done around transgender, and the counseling department and the work they've done to create processes that are fair for every kid to, honor what they feel about themselves so that they are successful. So thank you I know you can be a tough cookie and you can get up in front of that mic and start saying all kinds of stuff, but thank you, because sometimes we forget about the good things that are happening for kids in our district. So thank you for that comment. And yes, we did work with Elko Call, and we provided some services, and that's kind of the collaboration across the state. When we're doing something great, let's kind of share those practices and hope that we can get best practices from everybody. But today, really, I'm going to talk about great for door to door, but I want to talk about parent-teacher home visits because that's a big initiative that we have in the district. And last week I did my first one, right, because I try to be involved in that. And I just really want to show maybe, JJ, a short 20-second video from Chili. And this doesn't violate FERPA. His mom knows I'm doing this. But when we do those home visits and we talk to parents about what are their hopes and their dreams for their kids. And it was like, I was like going all over the place because there was like 6 kids. But what a beautiful thing when a parent can articulate what their hopes and their dreams are for each kid. And so historically, there has been Jack's Carnival and Sparks. And Achilles will be opening act for Jack's Carnival, and here's about 20 seconds because he practiced for me. Okay, here you go. Oh.
Buddy, thank you all for coming to our program. We are so glad you came. Might leave you scared and afraid. Our songs will be to play. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. After the performance, Jack's Carnival will go.
That was awesome. Of course, he practiced a couple times for us, along with some other things, and I got some pictures, and I think if she scrolls up, you can kind of see a picture of the family. But just the work that we're doing as a district for wraparound services. Our kids are much larger than a test score or a number, and there's a lot of things that happen on the academic side, but there's the social emotional learning piece, and the district is really, really refining and helping parents do a variety of things. So thank you for all the departments that make this happen, whether it's door-to-door, whether it's communications, and how we get out and engage our families is a wonderful thing that we continue to strive to do a better job at. And so I thought highlighting what actually happens when teachers go in homes. And just so you know, that was a picture of their bookshelf, and each child had a shelf of books, and we talked about stories, and as a result of that, they said, okay, they told me about this book that I am going to read. I'm not going to tell you about it right now unless you read my highlights, but the mom started talking about a book she was reading with her kid, and we're talking about children's books, right? And so their excitement, the book is Wander. So Wander, I'll just tell you, is a book about a kid who has a deformed face that went to homeschool, and eventually he goes to public school. And we actually have a student in our district that suffers from this. But the story is about acceptance. But to hear kids talk about it and how they were moved, then it just I wanted to read the book. So just that learning connection. And the mom was talking about reading the book, and our families are doing amazing things. So that's my report.
Very nice. Okay, we'll move on to consent items. I'd like to have anyone that would like one pulled. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve items 3.02 through 3.06.
I move that the Board of Trustees approves consent agenda items 3.02 through 3.06.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carries. Let the record show unanimously. Okay, we'll go to legislative items 4.01. Informational presentation to the board by the chairman of the Public Schools Overcrowding and Repair Needs Committee, Mr. Sean Carey, regarding the work and progress of the committee to date for information and discussion only. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you very much. It's my privilege to speak to the trustees today to tell you the good work that's being done by SB 411, a committee created by the legislature to work on developing a ballot measure for the overcrowding issue we have here in Washoe County. You know the problem in much more detail than we do at this point, and I think our learning curve is giving us a greater appreciation each day of the struggles you're facing to meet the growth that's coming. We did meet about every 2 weeks, and I wanted to thank Tracy and her staff for the overwhelming support we are getting. Not only are they serving you at a very high level as trustees, they're now asked to serve for this committee every 2 weeks, and that's an agenda, and it's all of the background and stuff. And I wanted to congratulate Tracy for the partnership that she's building between the committee and yourselves as trustees, because if there's one thing we realize is we have to work together. You're responsible as trustees for the school district, And we're going to learn so much about your plans in every time we meet so that we can begin to craft questions that you can provide answers to. And Tracy and her staff have been really exceptional. Mr. Etchart came forward and presented us his work, and it's very, very good work on needs. And it amounted to a report saying we have $819 million worth of verified needs for this school district. And we voted in a simple motion to say that we accept that we have a substantial, I'm sorry, the word they used specifically was a significant need. And so we've risen above the question of do we have a need for education. We have said we have a significant need. And that was a major outcome for us. It means we're moving past the question of need. It's on to what is the solution. And that's where your work is so important. On the 23rd of this month, we'll hear the Cunningham report that this board commissioned, which was, I was able to watch it on your telecast, and it's really groundbreaking work. And we're scheduling our meeting to take that issue on, to gain the understanding of the direction and the opportunities that are in that report that you're still working with. I understand that. But I think that that's a principal piece that you need to work further on and give us some guidance, because what that means is in your purview. You're the trustees, and you need to kind of give us an indication of where you want to go. $819 million is a substantial amount of money to raise, and we need to make sure that we have your good guidance. So please keep tackling that, and please keep giving us the great staff to lead us forward. We also had Mike Kurzmirski come forward, and he gave us a very interesting look at the future. And Tesla is bringing 6,500 jobs, but he has about a 90% confidence level that there are 5,800 other jobs coming from 139 contacts that are in the final stages. So the work of growth is something that we're going to meet head on as a school district, as a community, but it's certainly something that continues to draw us to the focus that we need to solve our school funding problem. It will be important to future employers to choose this community because there's a great school district that's ahead of the game, and we must continue your efforts to lead us. So I would just encourage you to keep in your mind that we have one more Tesla coming beyond what has been largely publicized. I wanted to thank you for your work on school policy for overcrowding. We asked for that to be on our last agenda, and it gave us your policy. You've said it, and it was great for us to get an opportunity to see what it means when there are 35 elementary schools potentially out there that are going to be under policy consideration of what's the best thing to do for children in elementary school. I'm proud of the work you did. It gives us a foundation as a community to kind of know where you're drawing the lines. I also believe that the Cunningham group and your work with that, continued work with that group, will begin to provide us some solutions that you want to set. When it comes to curriculum and how to provide an elementary school, there's a lot more to it than just simply saying it costs $25 million. Mm-hmm. How is that school going to serve us for 50 years in a manner that allows a curriculum to be successful? And that's where I believe your guidance and the superintendent's knowledge of the subject can lead us forward. But we will spend probably 2 hours learning from the Cunningham group, and they'll be asking a lot of our questions. The last one I wanted to touch on is we've looked at the 5 taxes that the bill gave us. And we've used your consultant, a person that has prepared your bonds, and we're not challenging his work. We're simply saying to him, give us a matrix of what these funding sources would provide. And it's room tax, it's real property transfer tax, it's real estate transfer tax, it's property tax, and it's sales tax. And so we have a matrix of looking at sales tax at 1/4 cent, 1/2 cent, 75 cents, and a penny, And if you had pay-as-you-go, if you went a 10-year bond, a 20-year bond, and a 30-year bond, that gives you a simple look at what the tools are that the legislature provided us. And we look at 5 things, not every tax in the world. And I'm sure that there'll be lots of work ahead to go through the tough work of sensitivity. And our committee wants to be sensitive to what taxes mean. And so don't misread that. There's 5 taxes coming. There's a lot of work to be done. But we do know at this point how far these individual components at different levels would begin to reach against that need. And so that was good work that we did. For members of the public, we have stretched out our calendar. We no longer believe it will be done before December. It's the complexity of the subject. So we will be meeting every 2 weeks right up until the end of March, when our committee statutorily ends on April 2nd. So we will continue to meet at the Washoe County Caucus Room. Our next meeting is on the 23rd, and that meeting will be at 9 a.m. And that appears to be our meeting location for the duration. And a calendar is posted for our committee on the website, so that is available too. We certainly encourage the public to participate either with the Board of County Commissioners on this issue or the 411 committee, which is working on a very small part of your world on your behalf. Do you have any questions for me?
I don't have any questions, just some comments. I'm so happy that you were elected to lead this committee. You're a fine gentleman and your heart's in it. And in fact, you chose your alma mater chair, and you're wearing your other one up on your chest. So you are proud of schools in our district, and you have a hard task ahead of you, but if anybody can accomplish it, I'm sure you will be able to. And if you would, at your meeting, start off with a thank you, a sincere thank you from the Board of Trustees in the Washoe County School District for the work that they're doing, because it's magnificent to give that time for well worth a cause as to provide us with funds to improve education in Washoe County. So thank them from the bottom of our hearts, if you would.
Will do, sir.
Is there any questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We'll go on then to agenda item 5.01, presentation to the board by a representative of the Wested Center for Prevention and Early Intervention regarding their report of findings and recommendations for improving systems within the district to achieve better special education student performance and compliance with relevant federal and state regulations regarding special education for presentation and discussion only. And we have one public comment. We'll do the comments after the discussion. So if you're here and you want to make comment, please fill out a yellow card. And it's going to, okay, I thought Rory Fitzpatrick, but you changed. Go ahead, Dr.
Thank you, President,
Green.
Mayor, Superintendent Davis, members of the board, Byron Green, Chief Student Services Officer. For the record, before I begin, thank you, Trustee, for representing RISE today. I'll share that with Principal Shabandi. Thank you so much. Before Rory went today, we want to just take a moment to set the stage about why we're here today. In February or March of this school year, when Superintendent Davis asked me to lead the Student Support Services, or our special education program, Superintendent Davis and also the trustees asked for an outside review of what that programming looks like. I think it's extremely important, I know that you'll hear this today from Rory, is that this review of programming is just not what is in special education, because as we know, our students with disabilities go to a classroom with a teacher and a school. They do not come to student support services. So I immediately, once hearing this request, I contacted Rory Fitzpatrick from West Ed, who I believe is more than capable and competent to provide an amazing review, and I think you're going to hear how comprehensive this review is. After today, we will be coming to the first board meeting in November.
The next board meeting.
The next board meeting, to talk about what are some initial next steps based upon the information that Ms. Fitzpatrick is presenting to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. President, Mayor, Superintendent Davis, members of the board, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be with you today. As Byron introduced me, my name is Rory Fitzpatrick, and I'm a program director at WestEd. For those of you who don't know, WestEd is a national nonprofit organization. We focus on issues of equity and excellence in education. I was going to say from womb to tomb. I'm not sure that sounds so lovely, but from birth through our seniority. How about that? Right. It's sort of the next evolution of cradle to career, I suppose. So I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about the project that you hired us to do, and thank you so much for your passion and interest and the chance to do this work with you. This report was presented first to the executive team of the school district about a month ago, and this is the same PowerPoint that was shared with that group. And before we get into it, I want to celebrate and honor the candor and trust and real commitment that I'm seeing out of the senior district leadership spearheaded by Superintendent Davis. You know, there are districts where we do the work and they say, great, could you tone that down for the board and for the public? And I'm really proud as a member of Washoe County, as a citizen here, that's not what your superintendent asked us to do. She said, no, we're about the truth. We're about kids. And so everybody needs to be on board with the truth, and we need to be about change. So I think that takes a minute of recognition and celebration of the candor.
Thank you.
And what you're doing. So cool. Okay, so what was the basis for this project? Byron gave us a little bit of an overview of that, but just so that we're on the same page, I'll say that there was a definite understanding from data that existed both in terms of your student performance data and your system performance data to make a decision in the district that change was necessary. So there was an opportunity here when Byron called me and said, are you interested in doing this work? And I said, yes, maybe. And here was my conditional maybe. And Superintendent Davis is smiling because I said this to the executive group. I said, I'm lucky enough at this point in my career to not have to say yes to every job that comes my way. And so I said, if your interest here is making the compliance police go away, I can tell you some people who can help you with that. That's probably not work I'm interested in. I said, if your interest here is really thinking systemically about how to improve outcomes for kids with disabilities, and by the way, that will increase outcomes for other kids. I said, if that's what you're about, then yeah, that's something that lights me up and I want to be a part of the partnership effort with you. And that's really what this was about. This was about what can we do systemically to raise the performance of kids with disabilities and incidentally other children as well. The project purpose had kind of two overarching goals. There were some compliance challenges that had existed. I think that's really public knowledge, and so there was not an interest in hiding from that. It was an important part of the work. It wasn't the totality of the work. And you'll see in the recommendations that it's an element. We think there are some things you need to be doing differently in terms of a philosophical approach to compliance, and some things also organizationally that should happen. But more importantly, this is about improving organizational systems to achieve results, both including academic performance, social and emotional success, and compliance results. It's worth noting on this slide that there already are some early implementation efforts going on. At the time this presentation was given to the executive team was about 6 weeks ago, so I think it's not such a recent appointment as this slide indicates, thankfully. But Superintendent Davis really has set a clear vision for inclusive education, and that word inclusive is very important. I've seen her speak and write about inclusive education and equity, and you'll see that that notion of inclusivity is really critical to the foundations of the work. There's also been some restructuring of the Student Support Services Department that has already occurred, including redefining some roles for personnel, trying to get Student Support Services personnel more deeply integrated at the school site level. Byron alluded to this, or said it actually clearly, and I just want to really reiterate it, that this is absolutely a systemic look at the performance of kids with disabilities. That's not an audit of the Student Support Services Department. Student Support Services is one of many departments in the district. The performance of kids with disabilities, and all kids, really is incumbent upon every single department and individual within the district. And so this was an opportunity to think about the system as a whole. And this is not about what needs to change in student support services. There probably are some things that have been changing that need to change over time, but it's really important that we recognize that this is not isolated to a single department or group of staff members. This is really about a systems fix. One of my favorite quotes is by John Muir, and I have an opportunity to travel nationally. You know, you'd be surprised that people in the East Coast don't actually know who John Muir is, which I just find horrifying as a person who goes to Yosemite once a year. But John Muir said, if you try to look at anything in isolation, you find that it's hitched to everything else in the universe. And I think we can draw the same conclusion about student performance. If you try to look at the performance of a child with a disability, it's not about the special education teacher who's assigned to that child. It's not about the aide. It's not about the bus driver. It's partly about them, and it's more than about them. So with that as a foundation, let's talk about what we did. We interviewed a number of individuals in personal one-on-one interviews and focus groups, including President Mayer. Thank you for your time. Many of the members who are sitting behind me gave time to be a part of focus groups and interviews. We had a teacher survey that was open to all teachers in the district, as well as an administrator survey that was open to all administrators. And we looked at a number of documents. In the report that accompanies this PowerPoint and that was made available to you in the board support materials, in the appendices, you've got a list of all of the artifacts that we looked at and the roles specifically broken down. This report is identifying 6 areas where we think there are opportunities for you to really focus systemically to improve outcomes for kids. The next set of slides I'll walk through highlight the recommendation for each of these particular 6. And then following that, there's a slide that is really a very short synopsis of a few things: the rationale for the recommendation, the related considerations associated with that recommendation, the associated challenges, and the associated opportunities at the time the report was finalized, which was the beginning of September. The full details are in the report that you've got that accompanies it, and so this is really intended to be a very high grain size just to facilitate a basic understanding of the concepts conceptually. Okay. Any questions before we look at the recommendations themselves? Okay. All right. An important precursor to looking at the recommendations, of which there are 6, is this foundational theme talking about collaboration. Without strong and meaningful collaboration across all of these particular recommendations, we don't believe that you'll get to the changes that you want. And so why are we saying that collaboration matters? Well, one of the things that we found that seemed to be really pivotal across all of the challenges and where it was working, why it was working, had to do with intentional collaboration among departments, among individuals. We found that in too many cases, there wasn't necessarily a systemic expectation for collaboration. Collaboration was the result of personal relationships that were built or were sustained. So if I happen to know the director of such and such department and she and I got along really well, we sought opportunities to collaborate with one another, which result in great outcomes. But if I'd never had the opportunity to meet the director of such and such division, we might not have that collaboration happening. This is, none of these recommendations will be easy to implement. I want to say that right up front. This is deep systemic work, which will take a number of years to achieve, and quality implementation planning and accountability. We'll talk more about that at the end. But really, without intentional collaboration among departments and assigned roles and responsibilities, I don't really think you can implement any of these other recommendations successfully. So that's an important foundational underscore. Okay, the first recommendation has to do with culture and climate. The research is very clear around systems change that leadership in a system matters for bringing a strong vision. One of the things that we really would recommend, there's a lot of words here, but just for the sake of everyone being on the same page, I will read this slide. Our first recommendation relative to culture and climate is to create and sustain an inclusive culture of high expectations for all students, recognizing that students with disabilities are part of the larger educational system and that there shouldn't be a separate vision for or a single department who bears responsibility for their success. And I think you probably already anticipated that was coming based on the introduction that we had. Some of the rationale driving this recommendation is that there seems to be a pervasive sense of disjointed vision. When we asked, what is the Washoe County School District vision for kids with disabilities, we often heard things like, well, there's no special ed vision, or we don't know what student support services is doing for kids with disabilities. And then we'd say, well, what's the vision for the district as a whole? And many people could say every child by name and face to graduation, without maybe stopping to think that every child means each and every one, right? Including kids with disabilities. So it's about setting an inclusive vision from the top. We talk a lot about this notion under related considerations of student ownership, right? And not to imply that anybody's owned students, but we own their outcomes, right? We bring passion to it. So one of the things that we think needs to happen is that there really needs to be a much more deep-seated understanding that kids with disabilities are first and foremost part of the general education system, and that when they perform well, we're all doing a good job for them. When they don't perform well, it's not a finger pointing at one particular section of the district. There are some challenges with this. It's hard to change people's beliefs. And I'll just say it because I can.
That's why I like you.
Not everybody believes that kids with disabilities can succeed in meeting high expectations. And that's actually a hard thing for me to say without getting a little emotional about it, because the research is really clear that when we have high expectations and we provide the teaching and learning conditions to support their success, they absolutely can achieve high expectations. And I think we have not only an obligation to our citizenship, but a moral obligation to have high standards for every child, and then to meet those high standards by supporting them in that work. So you've got some work here to do, because changing beliefs is really hard. However, you've got some really incredible associated opportunities. You've got leadership that is absolutely committed to this work, to making a difference. So I think you're further ahead than you might otherwise have been. The second recommendation has to do with compliance. Remember that some of this work was motivated by a desire to address some of the kind of long-standing compliance challenges that the district had had in meeting federal and state regulations as specified by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and by the Nevada Administrative Code. So let's look at this compliance recommendation. We would recommend that you develop and implement a comprehensive compliance system as a mechanism to drive and monitor system performance pursuant to district, state, and federal requirements. Right now, and I say right now, understanding that we stopped data collection, sometime in mid-August, so there probably already have been some changes made since that time. But at the time we finished writing this report, compliance was really viewed not as having a relationship to student performance. There was sort of like, check the boxes and we're done with that, and now what are we doing about meeting the needs of kids? So the whole purpose of an individualized education program meeting, or IEP meeting, is to talk about the needs of kids. And while you're talking about the needs of kids, there's some forms to help you stay on track and have the right conversation with the right people at the right time, and you sort of mark down those things on paper as you're going. The purpose of an IEP meeting isn't to mark down the things on paper. The purpose of an IEP meeting is to talk about what does the kid need, and what are we as the adults in the building, how are we going to change to meet the needs of the kid, right? But it seems like historically, at least in the last several years, there's been this sort of box checking mentality where we're checking the boxes and then we're trying to figure out what we need to do for the kid. We would say that compliance is an opportunity to leverage an understanding of what the conversation should be and who should be having it, not this sort of separate, isolated compliance activity where, okay, now we've appeased the compliance police and we're going away. The third recommendation has to do with communication. We would recommend that you enhance the district's system of communication so that all relevant stakeholders receive timely, accurate information, can engage in iterative opportunities to inform and influence the system, and experience conditions that lead to implementation of the district's vision. There are a lot of folks, particularly at the building level, who feel like things happen in a kind of reactive, fragmented way, and you learn information if you're sort of in the know or you happen to be at the right place at the right time, but there's not necessarily a proactive attempt to communicate in advance. Now, all of these, I should note, are recommendations in the aggregate, you can always find exceptions, and that's a really good thing. The good reason for that is that then you've got exemplars for where it's really working well. So please don't feel like we're saying that everywhere everything is bad. We're just saying systemically these are some things that are not consistently implemented. So we would recommend you think about a more proactive versus reactive approach to communicating information. There are some associated challenges here in terms of staff time, right? And I'm guilty of this myself. One of my bodies of work is to run a national center, and we have a hard time getting information out of there ahead of time. So I think this is a challenging endeavor. The good news is you've got some existing communication platforms that are in place, and you've got some highly skilled personnel in communication who can help you lead this work. I'm smiling at Irene. And there's high consumer interest. So people want the information, which it's a lot easier to get information out to people who want to receive it than it is to try to tell people things that they have no interest in reading. All right. The fourth one has to do with human capital. These are really the adults in the system. And not only the adults in the district, but your adults in general. We would recommend that you align professional development activities and collaborative support between human resources, student support services, and other programs to promote high expectations and ownership of all students by all staff. There are a number of people in positions who don't have a full understanding, and sometimes not even sort of a halfway understanding of what they're being asked to do. So if people don't have a clear understanding of what their job is, you have to ask yourself, do I have a clear understanding of what your job is? And if I have a clear understanding, then what competencies have I established to know that I've got a person who has the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to do the work? So you've got to start from what is it we're trying to achieve and back map from that purpose. If you know what you're trying to achieve, what are the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that we need in a given position in order to achieve that outcome? And then you hire and support against those dispositions, skills, and knowledge. So we found that a number of people are challenged by wanting to do a good job but not knowing what that job is supposed to be. And so if you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing and you're not really getting any feedback about whether or not you're doing the right thing, it's hard to know if you're succeeding. So we think that that's a real place where you need to target some work. There are some perceptions of competence, territory, and turf that have to be addressed here. That is my job, or that is not my job. And that's the place where district vision is really important here to say, as the leader of the system, I'm here to tell you that is your job. And as the leader of the system, I'm pleased to say, here's the multi-tier system of support to help you succeed in that work. All right. The fifth recommendation is about data systems. We recommend that you unify data systems in order to share accurate, timely, and actionable information across various departments and develop agreements regarding how to legally and effectively use information for a variety of purposes. You've got some pretty remarkable data systems in place. I think your overarching longitudinal data system in the district is quite good and is well administered. You've also got some splinter data systems that are not attached to the main data system, and sometimes those special ed data systems have more timely information about kids with disabilities demographics, but that's not the data set that's used to make resource decisions. So you can kind of see how if we've got an accurate data set here, and here's the data set we use to make resource allocations, and there's not a strong line between them. So that's a thing you need to think about, we believe. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And then the final recommendation is one that we've labeled a stretch goal. Let me read it, and then I'll explain why we think it's a stretch. And stretching doesn't mean you can't reach it, it just means it's harder. So we think you should refine decision-making processes and practices so that resource allocation is systemically driven by student performance parameters, with compliance as one criteria, but not the only or primary criteria. Let me say some things about that. Differentiation of students' needs is pretty important to allocating your resources well. It's not an intuitive part of your system or a required part of your system right now. So if Mrs. Smith is a teacher of kids with disabilities, most of whom have learning disabilities, and, you know, let's just say that Mrs. Smith is in a really inclusive school where they've got a strong teaming environment and the kids are spending a lot of time in general education settings, and boy, this happens to be a school where they've got some remarkable family engagement and some wraparound services. And so we're starting to get like a real picture of what Mrs. Smith's day might look like, right? Now let's think about Mr. Jones, and he's in a school where the teachers all kind of go into their classrooms and they close the doors, and you have to fight to get a kid with a disability into the door. And most of those kids, as a result, sort of, even though they might have learning disabilities, they're all spending most of their day in Mr. Jones's class, and he's not getting a lot of support from his general education peers. And by the way, they've had a lot of principal turnover, so, you know, not so sure that he's really getting the supports he needs for professional learning. Does Mr. Jones and Mrs. Smith's day look the same? In your resource allocation model, it does, because they've both been allocated the number of students to meet the caseload requirement. That's a compliance orientation. 22 kids in the room, good to go. 22 kids in the room, good to go. But those are not the same days for those kids. I mean, they're not the same days for the teachers, and that's a really unfortunate condition and problematic in all sorts of other ways, and especially it's not really the same for the kids. And so poor Mr. Jones, he's going to really struggle to meet the needs of his kids in a way that Mrs. Smith might not. So there's this notion you can kind of see of operating from what's in the interest of the student versus how are we doing at meeting the mandatory checks on the boxes, right? That's what this recommendation is about. One of the reasons it's a stretch goal is that the other goals will take reallocation of some resources. I'm not here to say that you're not going to have to think differently about resources. However, the other goals are really intentionally designed to not require you to go out and grow the money tree, because I haven't seen that particular seed, or I would have a garden in my backyard like you would not believe, for sure. So we tried to be really thoughtful about what can you do with the resources you have. In the first 5, you're either on the right path or you can be without a tremendous influx of new resources. Number 6 is going to take some new money. So all of this work is pretty systemic and is going to take a number of years. Number 6 is really going to take some thinking, because that's going to take you a period of time to study and understand your current system of resource allocation, to prioritize in which order you will move this work, because you cannot prioritize all of the resource allocations at the same time. I mean, just absent the money tree, it's not going to happen. And I think we felt as a team a real obligation to be truthful about that. So that's the recommendation of number 6, which really is that stretch goal. And then the final slide just talks about looking ahead to next steps. So here we are, October 13th, and you're receiving this information, and it's been made available to the public. WestEd is in the process of sharing an implementation plan template with the leadership and student support services. And then you'll see that you guys have some decisions to make about what comes next. We would recommend that you think about the culture and climate work immediately, and I think actually that's already underway at this point. It really sets the tone for the other recommendations. And then we would say that without really quality research-driven implementation planning, which goes kind of beyond just writing out an action list, right? I mean, it's about paying attention to what the research says about implementation, about continuous improvement. You need a highly evolved implementation plan and an accompanying system of accountability and support, so that the people who are implementing the plan have the tools and resources available to them, and the checks and balances to make sure that the plan is being implemented in order to move forward. So those are things that I would recommend you talk about first in terms of district leadership, is really continuing to move the dime on culture and climate. And then pretty immediately, I think you need a strong implementation plan. So that was our report. It was a tremendous opportunity to work with so many incredible individuals in Washoe County School District. We didn't meet a single person who wasn't committed to students and to the success of families and kids. And so that was the fun work, and this is the hard work of making a difference. But I think that you've got the commitment among the board and the superintendent to move that work. So I'm happy to try to respond to questions if you have any, or however you'd like to proceed.
All right, we'll take a round table here. Start with you.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. And I especially appreciate the philosophy that you've described about not wanting to make this easy for us. And I appreciate the commitment of our staff. I'm not at all surprised by that commitment. So thank you, Superintendent Davis, because we have here before us an opportunity to do better.
That's right.
And clearly there is great opportunity to do that. And facing what is happening and being honest with ourselves about that is absolutely critical for us to be able to move forward in a positive way for our students and all of our students. One of the questions I had was earlier on when you were talking about the process you used in communicating with staff and administrators and teachers, et cetera. I know on your slide you had parents, and I wanted to hear more about the conversations, or not in details necessarily, but how you outreach to parents and how many you spoke with, just some information about the interactions and the information you received from parents.
So thank you very much for that, Board Member Frankel. And I would say that we actually spoke with fewer parents than we would have liked to have talked to. We collaborated with the district to interview and engage in focus groups with individuals. Because of the timing of the project, it was the summer months, which made it a little tricky because I'm not sure there was I don't want to say easy because that implies that the district would only have done it if it was easy. That's not at all the message I'm trying to deliver. I think it was a challenging condition in which to provide that outreach opportunity. So there were some parents with whom we spoke, not nearly as many sort of working professionals in the district as with whom we spoke.
Is that it? Mr. Rosenberg.
This is a left-handed compliment. It's the first thing I've
Gee,
heard.
my favorite kind.
I knew you'd like it. This is the first time I have heard West Ed provide me with something that is substantive and not just fluff. Thank you. I really appreciate it. As I said, it was a left-handed compliment. However,
Thank you for recognizing the quality of the work.
you're welcome. Now then, the one thing that I'm seeing that complicates everything is the emotion. Handling that can be the roughest thing in the entire world. When it's your child, how the hell you're supposed to be completely objective, I couldn't do it. I don't have children of my own, but I can empathize how difficult it must be. Then on the other side, we're trying the best that we can. What do you want us to do? It's tough. It's really tough. Here's something substantive that maybe we can begin to follow a prescriptive way, and maybe things will change. God knows we want them to.
Yeah, I think that's right. Thank you, Board Member Rosenberg. So I'm actually a parent. I have two children who are 8 and 11, little red-headed boys. If you've ever tried to raise a red-headed boy. I hope parents are not objective about their children. I'm not objective about mine, sometimes disproportionately unfairly and sometimes disproportionately fairly, right? I think the key here is a conversation about the student's needs rather than a we don't have to do that kind of orientation, or we want to but we can't. I think we're all committed to getting to the right results, and there's a level of reasonableness I think that can come into play if people are genuine about what they're trying to achieve and we start with that student-centered approach.
Dr. McCleary.
Thank you so much. Over the years, of course, we've known each other in different circumstances, but I appreciate the fact that you are the professional that was provided to Washoe County School District in order to really take a look at what's been going on in special ed, where do we need to go, and how are we going to get there. One of the biggest issues that I have has to do with the support for the writing of a quality implementation plan. A quality implementation plan, as you talked about before, is very different than just a school improvement plan. It's something that really has to call into focus. It's almost like a backward map.
Yeah, it is.
And we're looking at where we've been, how did that happen, and what do we need to do to remedy to make certain that it doesn't happen again. So we look at the exploration of that and how we're going to install some of those changes, and then different stages of the implementation. I think that's probably most important. And so what I believe is that we're going to need some additional support for our staff. I'm not sure who's going to be involved in all of it, but we're really talking about the whole district. This does just not happen in one or two schools. We're talking about with the climate and the culture of all of the schools in relationship to the inclusiveness and the acceptance of children with differences, no matter where you are upon that spectrum. And that's a mandatory obligation that we have as board members to make certain that we communicate to everyone that all children by name and face to graduation means all. ALL, underlined, italicized. You can't leave this child out because you don't feel like working with him or her today. So I think that at the top, the leadership at the board level, although we've got our mission and our vision and we've got a lot of things in place, our core values, I think we also need to perhaps put together a statement of support for what we're going to be doing. And I must underline this again. I don't believe that we've got all of the people within the district are so busy. I believe we need to have additional support so that we can get this plan and put together and get it out on the road. And it's going to be tough. But I think when you love what you're doing, and most of the teachers that I know and the administrators and so on, everyone cares about what they're doing. They don't have all the answers. None of us do. But it's really important, as you also talked about, the job description in relationship to here's what this person is going to do, here's what the expectations are, here's possibly some of the things that will be expected of this person, and then whether or not that person can adhere to those. Sometimes I think that you're very true and certain about this is a relational district. This is a situational place where if you know this one, you probably find out faster than somebody else. Or if you know this, you're going to get that. So I think that that's very important that as we put this plan together, those issues are discussed and pointed out. That doesn't say we cannot change the culture of the school district. We must change it. So I really appreciate the fact that once again you were chosen to do this, that we have a superintendent who implicitly, intuitively, and heartfelt understands what the word all means. So I hope that we'll be able to put together a quality implementation plan with support. Since we can't make a motion, this is a discussion. Hopefully we can put this as an agenda topic at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member McClory. I just want to say I was going to conclude with this, but I'll say it now because it feels like the right time. I was one of 4 team members who was a part of this work, and I want to recognize the other individuals, 2 of whom are West Ed colleagues of mine, not here today, but Kevin Schaefer and Art Darren. And then also we had the great ability to contract with Kimberly Smirkers Bass as an independent consultant, and all 3 of those individuals, they actually did a lot more of the work than I did. I just get to sit here and look smart as a result of their incredible work. So it's definitely a team effort. And the thing I'll say too about implementation, and you spoke to stages, it can't be underscored deeply enough. The research by Fixon and Blase says that if you try to scale up an evidence-based practice without attention to stages of implementation and attention to implementation drivers and continuous improvement, along with an accompanying team and system of accountability, that work to scale up one evidence-based practice can take up to 17 years. When you do the work attending to the research on continuous improvement and implementation science, you can scale up an evidence-based practice within 3 to 7 years. Thank you.
Trustee Ruggiero.
Thank you, President Mayer. So thank you for the report. There's one area that I do disagree with on the report, and that is focus area 6, calling it a stretch goal. I really think it should be called a goal. I think that's probably the most important goal out of the entire report, in my opinion. And I think that's something that the trustees need to take take very seriously. So I appreciate you calling it a stretch goal, but I'd like you to remove the word stretch, honestly, and that's my personal opinion. You know, it was disheartening for me to hear your description of the difference between what some of our staff members are facing, where there's a staff member who is in a school environment where there's collaboration versus a staff member who has to fight to try to get their student into a mainstream classroom. That makes me angry as a trustee. And I have no doubt with the leadership of our superintendent and Dr. Green that that will be addressed and the support and focus of this board. But this has been too long-standing of an issue in our district, and I do want to credit Dr. McClory and also President Mayer. This has been an issue that has been so important to them, also an issue that is incredibly important to me. But I just want to make sure that we're taking this seriously. And you know, when you take something serious, you have to put your money where your mouth is. So I appreciate you being sensitive to that issue, but I think it's a long overdue discussion by this Board of Trustees in this particular area. Other than that, I think you're spot on in many of your observations in this report, and I'm appreciative for that. But we have a lot of work to do still in this area.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for bringing that passion and honesty to the conversation. Without that kind of candor at the leadership level, you won't make the changes you're trying to make. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Listening to Trustee Ruggiero, that reminded me. When we look about and talk about the multi-systems of school supports in the safe and healthy schools, this is something that we also need to be concerned about. And the assumption, and I'm not sure, but this may be something else that also needs to be discussed during a planning for implementation, would be where are we in relationship to how far along we are to making an effective district-wide multi-systems of support, multi-tier systems of support, because I've been reading a lot about UCLA work on development of learning supports in districts that are making certain that children are in fact getting what they need, but also re-engaging children who have become disaffected for whatever reason. So if we look at that multi-system, we look at the barriers to learning, see, that's all part of an action plan. So I don't know how that fits in. But those are things that I believe would have to be included, is what's the status of what we're doing. And RTI is one thing. I'm not sure that we're fully engaged in the multi-tier systems of support for all students. And I don't know that that's possible necessarily, but I think that we really need to look at where we are on this roadway and this pathway, because that's now been implemented for a number of years. I'm not sure Paula Marca was involved in the rollout of that. But the RTI is something, again, looking at the quality of what we're doing and how we're doing what we're doing, and looking at all of these systems, including this whole learning support, to make certain that system-wide, I mean, I know schools on a personal level who have everything all wrapped up, and they've got very, very tight organization and skills and dispositions and attitudes and all the rest of it in how they're going to service every single child based upon the needs that those children present. That is what I hope for, obviously, but the scaling up of that is another part of this plan that then makes it even more complicated, I believe. Thanks.
Mr. Smith.
Well, I wanted to just thank you for your research, and then my comment is I'm glad to see that the first focus area is culture and climate, because I think that puts us in a real perspective. Mm-hmm. And if you could be frank, then so can I. So I'll take my moment to be frank.
Okay.
Oftentimes, you hear at the Board of Trustees and our teachers and administrators say how great everybody is doing, right? But to be politically activist, that's almost like drinking the Kool-Aid. we need to be reminded sometimes from people from the outside that there is work that needs to be done, and not everybody in our system is doing great. And so we need to deal with those people. The research shows it. I was very shocked when you started talking about that the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is doing, and maybe the foot doesn't think that they can get the support because maybe it's who you know. And that's disheartening. But those are some of the struggles in an organization such as our size.
Yeah.
And it's not just in our organization, it's any organization. But the truth is, and I think what the trustees have to remember, is we have a lot of great teachers, we have a lot of great administrators, and then we have some that maybe aren't so great. And that's where we have some work to do to build the culture and climate. And I think that the real reward will be, yes, certainly helping children with disabilities to have greater outcomes. But when you tackle culture and climate, which a lot of that can be done by setting a tone from the top, from the Board of Trustees, from a superintendent, with some clear accountability measures saying, this is the line. If you cross the line, then we'll deal with you on a different level. But don't cross the line. The whole sea rides with the tide. And that will help all of our students, not just those children with disabilities. I also agree with Lisa on the stretch goal. I'm usually conservative when it comes to the money, so I want to see how some of these other things can work too. But we do need to make sure that money is a part of the process, because the money is oftentimes a solution, right? So that's important to me as well. And then just holding the people accountable and meaningfully accountable, right? We have to have real meetings. We have to have real professional development, not reading a book about the lady who swallowed a fly. What does professional development look like for our people who are working with our children with disabilities every day? And that should be pretty much everybody in the school building, not just the disability resource teacher, because we want to get these kids into the general population. So our general population teachers need all of those same supports. Otherwise, you have the left hand and the right hand, and that doesn't work. So I think that the information you're providing is very honest, and it allows us to set a tone for an honest conversation amongst ourselves, which I think sometimes doesn't happen. And maybe it needs to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Smith. I would say that the sort of good news, bad news is that Washoe County School District is not alone in facing this challenge. You have a number of peer district colleagues across the nation who find themselves struggling with the same challenges that you are. The good news is that you're tackling those challenges head on. And the only thing I guess I would add, in addition to what you said about accountability, is that I'm of the strong personal belief that a quality system of accountability is a system of accountability and supports. So it's not just a system of sanctions when it's not working, it's a system of supports so that everybody does succeed. And when you find places where it's not working, you further investigate, just like you would for a child, what are the supports that are needed. Now, there will come a place where sometimes maybe it's not the right fit for the person who's in the work. And I guess I'd also say that you need that system of accountability and supports, not just for those personnel in the district who might be struggling, but also for the personnel in the district who are doing really well. They both have and deserve access to that quality system of support and accountability. Thank you.
Dr. Taylor.
I want to echo just our appreciation for you and your colleagues and the work that you've done. One of the things that we talk about a lot around the table is, we know that we aren't great at everything, and we know that sometimes we're going to make some. Okay, good. So it isn't just us. Okay, great. But also then when we find the areas where we know that we can improve, when we find the areas that we haven't done the work that we know that we really want to do in the best interest of the 64,000 kids, that first thing we do is we own it, and then we fix it.
Right.
And having this report is really having our staff not ask you to make changes is our first, I think, our really first as a board, as a district, saying we own this. We have to own this. Right. I mean, everything rises and falls on leadership, and we have to lead our way out of this. And that's what each of us are around this table to do. And we have to, some of the things I learned, and I learned a lot when I was reading this report, that you sent, and one of the things that I learned that really makes a lot of sense is not looking at the education that we do for those kids with disabilities, those kids that need extra help, the special education. It should not be done in the silo. Right. It really should be a part of our overall educational effort, and not just for those kids that need the extra support, but it's just as important for the kids that don't. to be in that environment as well. Certainly everybody rises, the whole C rises, absolutely, but everybody benefits from that when that happens, those students as well as those teachers. So I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the approach that really when we talk about diversity, so many times we think about race and gender and sexual orientation. We don't think about special education. But that's an area as well, and we would never say that diversity should only be held to the office of equity and diversity.
Right.
And we would never say that.
Right.
And we've allowed ourselves to say that in the area of special education, and that we need to own and we need to fix. So, and I agree with my last two colleagues that spoke. This is a challenge to the board that we just need to step up to and say we haven't done our best work here. We always want to do our best work. We haven't done our best work here. For who cares how many reasons, it doesn't matter. What matters now is that we put ourselves in a position to do our best work going forward. And so I thank you, and I am encouraged and I'm proud of the statements from my colleagues around the table that is absolutely our intention to change that and to begin to do a much better job of serving those kids so that when we say every child by name and face to graduation, every kid gets that opportunity. And I believe that we mean that.
Yeah, thank you, Vice President Taylor. I would encourage you to think about this from a paradigm of continuous improvement. The work by Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth and others, they talk about a growth mindset, right? So many of us know that quote about the invention of the light bulb, I have not failed 700 times. I've figured out 700 ways that didn't work. So you haven't failed. You've identified some things in the system that are working well, and you've identified some places where you have opportunities to improve. You're going to have to maintain a growth mindset across the number of years, I think, in order to achieve this systemic change. You will not fix this all immediately or the first time. To learn and to grow is to fail. That's how we learn and grow.
I want to thank you for the work you've done, but I look at special education not as numbers on a chart. First of all, I think we have to have a whole attitude changed in education, not just special education, but education. Instead of saying those kids, or I'm a teacher in 4th grade, or I'm the principal of X school, what we got to do is, if you ask somebody, what do? I teach children to gain and become better suited for the future. That's what we got to do. And I go to schools and very nice, competent people, but they use terms like, them kids in room 21 should be out in a trailer. It's not them kids, it's our kids. And I think we have to get ownership for every single student, and we have to look at every kid as a potential getting the cure to cancer. And say, man, I'm going to teach this kid everything that he needs so he can cure cancer. Because the ability of these kids today is phenomenal. And and the way that we select which schools get special ed by just units of special ed, by just, this building over here has 3 empty classrooms and we got 4 programs that we need someplace to put. So we're going to put them in that place, and they're really only equipped for maybe 2 good programs. But it always seems like it's not, this school could do a better job because they have the facility that's capable of helping all students to be tolerant of others. And I think, you can talk about graduation rates and all that, but people don't get fired on what they don't know or they know. It's their ability to get along with people. And if we don't teach everybody to get along with all our students, all 61,000 last I heard, but if we don't teach our teachers to have that attitude that these are all our students, we're not going to get anywhere. We can't change climate on that. We've got to really delve into personalities and improving personalities and caring for kids. And it's going to become harder and harder with the shortage of special ed teachers. I heard in Clark County that some of the teachers that they're putting in special ed have no background in even knowing how to write an IEP. No, that's not right, and that's going to happen to us because that shortage, we got to make it so that a student says, I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference with my kids, and I'm going to be a special ed teacher at such and such a school. And until we change that basic attitude and get feeling and caring back into the school district, we'll have a hard time with these other goals.
Thank you,
Now that I'm
President
on the soapbox, I'll get off.
No, thank you, President Mayer. I mean, I think you're right that it starts with vision, and it starts with making the vision real.
Superintendent Davis, I sometimes forget you.
Clearly.
But you're where it starts, so I hope you listen to me.
So I have notes, and I know I can't say everything in my notes, but we talk about all children matter, whether they're special ed, ELL, GT, African American, Hispanic, children in transition, but all 64,000 kids make a difference in the work that we do. And so, Rory, I can appreciate, me and you, and to tell it like it is. I did not ask her to water down, cover up, or anything in the presentation. Like, it is exactly what we received. And to me, when we received it, I wasn't necessarily shocked because it's work that we had talked about where we see areas of improvement. But as Rory spoke, we know about a time lapse of when we kind of restructured student support services and announcing Dr. Green, and then you coming on board and working with Dr. Green, and the work that that department has continued to do throughout that entire process and continues to do. And we will be coming back to the board in November, and it's just because there's not a board meeting in the last week of October, to talk about some of that work that we've shared with you and use a lot of the information you've provided us to address some of those issues. And I think I have a special place in the special ed work because not only as a former teacher who provided instruction to differentiate for a variety of kids, whether they were special ed, 504 or whatever, you have to do that in a classroom setting because every kid might not qualify. I mean, you know how the work behind IEPs and special ed and differentiation for everybody. Then you apply that work as a building leader, as a principal, and how do you get all teachers to buy into that? And I know a lot about that work because I was a part of a turnaround effort in Clark with a school that become amazing and closed gaps for special ed kids. And then you apply it to me, the parent who has a kid with an IEP. So the variety of how I understand that work. And it's a heavy lift for people, especially when you're trying to change a mindset about those kids versus they are all our kids, whether they're assigned to you or they get pulled out or whatever that least restricted environment is. And where we start off with what does the kid need, right? Because every kid is different. When we talk about our 4 fundamental practices that we opened up with this year, we talk about inclusive practices, we talked about core curriculum, we talked about environment and climate, right? And we talked about multi-tiered systems of support. We rolled that out as a district in the beginning of the year with all principals. This is the core of the work that we will do because that work applies to every kid, whether they're special ed or ELL or whatever. And that's going to be our continued focus. And when we go into our leadership meetings with our administrators, we're going to talk about that ongoing. When you look at what we're going to do this Friday and that work, it's going to be embedded in the very culture of the work that we do throughout the district because everybody knows that that is my number one priority, is how we go about fixing that as a system so that in 10 years when none of us are sitting around this table, we have systems of accountability for all kids that last the test of time. And we know that the best districts that are most successful at moving from good to great put in great systems to support the structures. And with that, I'll say I know that Dr. Green and his department is here, so if you all would just kind of stand up if you are part of student, don't make me call you out. Student support services. This has not been easy for this department at all. There has been tough conversations, arguments, closed doors, whatever. But through tough conversations, we get better answers for our kids. And we know that we have tons of work to do. We talk about resources and systems, you know, and I think Rory said it many times. We've been working on that. There's just been a gap of time from when we actually received the report to the work that Tom has been doing with the finance department with special ed, to what Don's doing with HR to put highly qualified teachers. We got to do this recruiting effort, and how are we getting those teachers, to how they're supporting writing IEPs. And it is very complicated work. But when you look at what we're going to come back and talk about, it is embedded in every department. You talked about communications and doing the work. So it's not just academic side of the house, it's the operations side of the house and how we do this work as a team that supports special education students. But a residual effect is that it will impact all kids because there's some best practices embedded. So I know we're going to continue to do work, and thank you for bringing the real truth. You know, there was never a secret about the work, and sometimes in a district you have to get to the truth and tell it like it is to improve upon that, and we were dedicated to that. And one of the things I loved about you, Rory, is when you took the job, it was like, if it's compliance, nope, right? Because we can fix compliance, right? But you need work. You got to talk about the hard work when you talk about all the other issues. So thank you, and your great department, who I probably sent over the edge when they interviewed me, but for the work that you are doing with us. And we are so proud of that work and the work of the team and the work of many departments to make this heavy lift. And we know it's going to take time. And so it's not going to be we fixed it in December, right? It's going to be years to see that. So thank you for your work.
Well, thank you all very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and we have some public comment that we're going to get to. Mr. Larry Daly, 3 minutes, please.
I have such mixed feelings right now. 7 years ago, I first met Rory Fitzpatrick and asked her to meet with the district superintendent and me, and she said yes. And the district superintendent turned the meeting down. Thank you, Tracy Davis, for allowing her to do her work. The report that she's just delivered could have been delivered 7 years ago. It hasn't changed. There's nothing in there that surprises me at all. You notice I haven't been here lately. We've developed a better working relationship, I think, with Frank Salvaggio and some of the people, but it doesn't matter. My daughter graduates this year. It doesn't matter. Every person by name and face. Look her in the eyes and explain why it took 7 years to have this report. It wasn't like people didn't try to get your attention. Now go to the people who are juniors now, look them in the face, remember their names, and say, I can't fix this for another 3 to 7 years. Very mixed feelings. It hurts. Yes, you have to look at it as a systemic issue, and system changes are hard. You have to look at it as a student issue too. Those names and faces deserve better tomorrow. So I would invite you to say, where can we make the most change the quickest? And what can we do tomorrow to make sure the message is sent loud and clear? There's a new sheriff in town, and we have new partners, and we call those partners parents. If I'd have felt heard, I wouldn't have had to do what I did. I did it because I felt my child was in jeopardy, and I know she lost what could have been. Don't let that happen to other kids. Rory is a professional, and her report is good. We must act on it. We must set up rubrics and timelines, and we must make changes for every face and every name before the end of the year.
Thank you very much. Linda Daly.
I too applaud this report and the efforts of Rory and Kimberly and their two other partners from WestEd. This is a really, really vital report. You all needed to hear this from many different directions, and I think you got that. And in their efforts to talk to parents, talk to the educators, talk to administrators. The thing I want to address is this foundational theme undergirding the recommendations that they mentioned, that collaboration is integral to every element of the system's success. And they pointed out that that's not happening. You've got to make that happen because that will lift, that rising tide will lift all boats. If you start learning to collaborate, it's not just the special ed kids who are going to benefit, it's going to be every kid. However, I think you need to go beyond what they say in here and extrapolate what they're saying, where they talk about the enhanced and sustained interdepartmental, intra-district collaboration. It's not just within the district. You have to make that collaboration with the parents. I remind you that IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, identifies who has to be team members of a child's IEP team, and the first persons they list are the parents of the child. Please recognize that parents here are your partners. You have a whole department called Family School Partnerships, and you really need to apply that here because parents are your partners, they are your resources. They have been dealing with this child and this particular disability for years before this child ever walked into your classroom. Please recognize that they are an expert on their child and have an experience with this disability that your educators do not when it's only been in a classroom or an educational or some clinical setting that they have learned about that disability. These parents live with it day after day before they ever got to you, and they're going to live with it for the rest of their child's life. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. That's all the cards that I have. Is there anyone that didn't fill out a card that would like to speak? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in that. And I'm sorry, but that's okay. Go ahead. I was just taught, we're going to have something here on the agenda next month.
The next
for
board meeting.
action.
Next board meeting.
Next board meeting in
I think it's November 12th? 10th.
10th. November 10th, we'll have an action item on this matter. Okay, Lisa? 5?
Let's take 10.
All right, let's go for 10. Yes, sure. This meeting will be in recess for 10 minutes. Oh, I thought you were trying to get Mike's attention. Oh, okay. All right, so we're on item 5.02. Discussion and preliminary approval of the proposed deletion of Board Policy 6000, shared decision-making for possible action. Presenters are Ben Hayes and Dr. Lamarca.
Good afternoon. For the record, Ben Hayes, Chief Accountability Officer. I'm here to discuss shared decision-making policy. And we came to the board policy committee last week and said this policy was from 1993, and it kind of conflicts, or it does conflict, with the board's adopted theory of action, managed performance empowerment. So we recommend, and again, in the face that it's almost 30 years old. We recommend staying with the theory of action, and that's how we kind of have been going through leadership in this district for the last several years. So hence the recommendation for deleting this policy.
May I make a motion,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor? I move that the Board of Trustees provides preliminary approval of the proposed deletion of Board Policy 6000, shared decision-making, and initiates the 15-day public review process.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for all of you that approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same signal. So carried. Let the record show unanimously. Number 5.03, discussion and parliamentary approval of the proposed preliminary. All right, preliminary approval of the proposed deletion of Board Policy 6175, small learning communities for possible action. The same two presenters.
President Mayer, Superintendent Davis, for the record, Paul LaMarca, Chief School Performance Officer, and quickly to Trustee Rosenberg, some things get better with age and some things don't.
Thank you.
Similarly, we went to the board policy subcommittee last week and talked about the small learning community policy. This was a policy that was written, it was a statutory requirement stemming from the 2007 session. We feel like the policy is unnecessary now. The legislation no longer requires it. It's somewhat limiting in terms of what we can do, what it asks us to do. Prior to making a final decision to recommend to you to delete it, we did talk with all the schools about what measures are in place to support ninth grade students, and there are a variety of things that are being done to make sure they transition strongly into the high school kind of environment, and they're well supported throughout that freshman year and throughout their high school experience. We have for years, and you've seen this at the data summits, we collect data for all students at every grade level, but that's a huge transition to 8th, 9th grade. We know who's at risk. We make sure there's additional supports. We have measures in place to connect with families of all these students. So like the other policy, we just feel like it's an unnecessary document at this point in time.
Okay. Yes.
I'm willing to make the motion if.
Okay.
And the main reason I'm comfortable making this motion, and I want to do it, is my first resistance to, last week I think I brought it up, the concept of anything removing small learning communities. But I appreciated the explanation that you gave, that it may be limiting to some of the other strategies and creative approaches that are being used throughout the schools. So, with that said, I move that the Board of Trustees provides preliminary approval of the proposed deletion of Board Policy 6175, small learning communities, and initiates the 15-day public review process.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So carried.
Thank you.
Again, both of these were for preliminary, so we'll have it again on our next meeting. Okay. But they go out for the 15-day review? Okay. Number 5.04, discussion and preliminary approval of the proposed revision of Board Policy 9012, legal counsel for possible action. Chris Reich.
Good afternoon, President Mayer, Superintendent, Trustees. This is a policy we're looking for preliminary approval. This policy for legal counsel was last changed and adopted in 2008. Went to the policy committee beginning back in May of this year for revisions. The Office of General Counsel with Mr. Malloy worked diligently trying to find language that would satisfy the policy committee. We brought it back last week on October 6th, talked to the policy committee with the changes, and they were satisfied, and now it's being brought to you for preliminary approval. I'll take any questions about it.
Any questions? Motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move that the Board of Trustees provides preliminary approval to the proposed revision of Board Policy 9012, legal counsel, and initiates the 15-day public review process.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So carried, let the record show unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I thought at our Friday that we were going to discontinue item.
We have to have that discussion.
Oh, it was already posted, so in the next time it won't be?
A
Okay.
discussion.
Huh? What, Mr. Smith?
I think we still have to decide on that, because I think our Friday thing was just conversational.
Okay. Okay, public comment, I don't have any cards. Okay. Next meeting announcement will be November 10th at 2 p.m. in this board meeting. With that, your meeting is adjourned.